Listen, if you're anything like me, you have a bunch of tasks between work, your personal brand, your friends, all these different aspects that pull at you from different directions. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. If you are looking for a way to be more productive, but not be burnt out, then I've got something for you. You've come to the right place. Welcome back to another episode of Donuts, Coffee, and Tech. I am your host, the Danielle J., also known as Danielle Johnson. And however you are listening to this podcast, whether it be through Apple Podcasts or you're watching me live on YouTube, I just want to say thank you for being here. Today's episode is all about the power of three. And some of you may be familiar with this methodology. Some of you may not be as familiar with the methodology, but I want to get into it because this is something that has helped me tremendously over the course of maybe even 6 months now. And when I think about my life and how busy it is, on paper, there's no way in hell I should be able to get all the things done that I've been able to get done, right? And yeah, it got to a point where I was so hung up in what was not happening that I just stopped doing everything. And it was in those moments that I realized that there has to be a better way. Like, there just absolutely has to be a better way. And I'm here to tell you, there is a better way. And I'm going to share with you what I've done differently in my life to help be more productive and not be burnt out, right? So, one of the biggest misconceptions that I had to tackle in understanding this methodology is that multitasking is some made up shit, right? Like, people that say they're good at multitasking, I challenge them because the human brain was not designed to multitask for the long haul, right? Like, we can do multiple things at once, but hopefully you're doing the multiple things that are not important at one time, because priority is what's important in the brain. And I read a bunch of scientific papers on this back when I was in school for psychology, because there was this really cool exercise that my professor had us do. And basically all it was you go down this list and you write out different names, and he would give us different names to write. So whether it be colors and just writing down different colors, or it was numbers going up from 1 to whatever the end number was. And what we found out really quickly is that a person who is able to do one thing at a time was able to actually do it more accurately, number one. And number two, they were able to complete the task, because technically he would have two different things going on simultaneously. So if you're writing down colors across the top, you would write numbers going down, and there would be a bunch of errors, right? Or it would just take longer because you're trying to do two things and your brain had to understand what was the priority. So after that task, that was so many moons ago, I really have adopted this idea that multitasking is the devil, right? A lot of jobs ask you to multitask, and I don't think that's fair. And one of the things about my job, my current role, is that there's a bunch of tasks that need to be done. And before I got the job, there was no priority put on any of it. So none of it was getting done. And I had to step back, because when you get a new job, you really want to do well, and you don't want to lose the job, number one, but you also don't want to appear to not be qualified for the work. So I took a step back and I looked at everything. I legit have a whiteboard full of sticky notes that have all these different tasks on there. And I took it upon myself to actually prioritize what was, really important, what was not as important, what needed multiple people involved in order for it to get done, what I could just do by myself. And I really just took the time out to pull all these things out and looked at it and said, you know what? I can only do what I can do. Everything else that requires other people, it has to be prioritized based off of timelines, deadlines, etc., etc. But I have to do something. And that's when I stumbled upon the power of three. And the long end of it we'll get into a little bit later, but the short end of it is you basically take your 3 most important tasks of the day and you knock those out. You clean up, right? And then you move on. That's really simple, right? That's the most simplistic way of going about it, right? A lot of people watching or listening to this might be like, well, that seems easy enough, and in practice it may not be as doable because 3 things seems like there's not enough things to do for a day. But let me go ahead and challenge you to think about this differently, right? So 3 things doesn't sound like a lot. It really doesn't. And I'll be honest with you, when I first started this methodology, it was really hard for me to limit myself to 3 things because 1, there were so many tasks that needed to be done. And then 2, I am an overachiever. Like, I really like doing a lot of things. And sometimes for the sake of just saying that I do a lot of things, right? So I had to really swallow my pride and say, a lot of this shit's not getting done. So what does that mean? Like, how can I rectify this? And basically, I did it the old way, right? I wrote a to-do list and it was a bunch of stuff. So in the to-do list, we just wrote out all these different tasks, right? And what I realized very quickly is that there was a lot of procrastination, even when I tried to go about the to-do list in the ways that a lot of productive people go about to-do lists, tackling the hardest thing first so that you can get it out the way, or the reverse of that, doing the easiest thing first, that way you can actually get something done. No matter how I went about this to-do list, it was always overwhelming enough for me to procrastinate and drag my feet. It's just the nature of the beast. And some people are just built like that. You know, not everybody's built the same, and it's really hard to have a catch-all method for everybody. So even with this methodology that I'm going through, it may not work for you, but it's worth looking into if you're interested in finding a way to knock these tasks out, right? So I realized also in the procrastination that I would do a lot of self-sabotaging, and that would look like me waiting to the very last minute to do things. That way there were like more errors, or like me trying to like get around certain tasks because I felt overwhelmed by the task itself. So I had all these different things happening at the same time, and I took a moment after that. And as you can tell, I take a lot of moments to really self-reflect because I do want to be better, right? And also because I want to be able to deliver this information and this message to you all with hopes of helping you get better in your craft, right? So in this reflection period, I talked to my tribe, and I asked them about what they're doing with procrastination. Are they self-saboteurs? And then I talked to myself to see what was going on, and I had to make some real changes and do things different than the ways that I had done them before, right? Obviously, the long to-do list does not work for me. Doing the hardest thing first does not work for me, fam. Doing the easiest thing first does not work for me. So I had to cut the crap, man. And what that looks like for me is taking an audit on all of the priorities of my life. Well, let me back up a little bit. There's really 3 things that you have to do before you prepare for the big 3, right? The 3 things you have to do in preparation of the big 3, or the methodology that I'm about to teach you, which is the big 3, is 1, you have to take an audit on what's actually important in your life. Where are you at right now, right? Because a lot of us just coast. We get the job, we get the group of friends, we get, whatever. We're in a rhythm, we're in a flow, but it's not necessarily what we want to do because it doesn't align with our priorities, right? So I took a real life audit on my life to see like what is actually important to me right now. And because we're going with this idea of 3s, I do it 3 months at a time, which equals 4 quarters in a year, right? Quick maths, there's 4 quarters in a year. Each quarter has 3 months. So every 3 months, re-looking at this priority list and saying like, okay, these things are important to me now. So, I kind of move things along that way. Number 2, I had to take into account like what's happening in my life, like what physical things are happening in my life. In the last year, I moved and started a new job all within a month of each other, so that's a lot of change, and having friends move to another country, and then, my best friend has stage 4 cancer, and there's just a lot of things that are happening in my life. So I have to take that into account when, one, I'm doing the audit of my life, but then two, just so I can check in with myself and make sure that I have enough energy and can give myself enough grace to do the things that I need to do in my life, right? And then number three, last but not least, I prioritize by need versus my want. So I want a lot of things in my life, and they're not even material things. They're really just like goals and ambitions and tasks that I think need to be done in order for me to feel adequate in what I deliver. And I wrote out this list of what I want and what I need. And I started realizing a trend between where I'm putting more emphasis, right? I'm putting more emphasis on what I want as opposed to what I need, right? And when I started realizing that trend of okay, what I want is attainable, but it's not necessarily the right now priority, it eased up so much anxiety. And in that anxiety being lifted, I was able to realize fam, all I really have to do is what I need to do, and that will take care of what I want, right? I made sure to look at it in the correlation as opposed to two separate entities, because when it's two separate entities, it creates so much chaos in me. And I'm just what I want is on an island by itself, and what I need is on an island by itself. These things don't exist together. They don't ever talk to one another. They never communicate. They don't give a damn about one another, right? But that's not true. They literally live inside of one vessel, which is me, and they have to communicate with one another, because what is one without the other, right? So there's that. Now, after I did all these things, it was super powerful because, one, I have anxiety, and I really, really, really get anxious about my future. I do. One is because, growing up a certain way, you kind of see life through this lens of everything has to happen right now, because if not, we're in desperate times and desperate measures have to be taken and all these different things. But then also, the anxiety is really coming from this compartmentalization that's happening in my mind, and being eager and anticipating what the next thing is, right? So when I did this, I was able to really see things for what it is, lift that anxiety, and look at things objectively so that I can move forward, right? And of course, after this part, I go on YouTube, I look at all these different articles on Google, looking at people on Instagram, on TikTok, and I'm just really deep diving into this idea of productivity and trying to find something that's organic to me and the way that I know kind of works for me, but not really understanding what fully works for me, just because we're operating from a new part of the brain. And I really took into account that I'm going to have to try a couple of things to see what works, right? So I stumbled upon this gentleman who had this idea to write down what you have to do the next day, and write down 5 things, and write them in order from most important to least important. And then after you write the 5, do something, come back to it, scratch off the last 2, and those are the 3 things you have to do for the next day. And I thought that was brilliant. I said, okay, cool, bet. I like it. It's clever, it's manipulative of the brain, which for some reason sounded good to me. As long as I'm manipulating my own brain, we're fine. And I thought that it was a really savvy way to go about trying to stay productive. So I took it into account when I was doing my research on all the different things to do, right? I also had to take into account that I'm a competitive person by nature, right? I want to win, period. I've always been that type of person where I want to win. Winning means more to me than a lot of things. And here lately, in the last maybe 5-6 years of my life, I've learned how to be more ethically competitive. I was unethical at one point, not meaning I was killing anybody, but it would get to fight level, energy wise. So I have to take that into account. So then I started looking at all these different people talking about like wanting to win and like what competition means to them and competitiveness means to them when they're setting their goals and all these different things. And that really opened my eyes to something. A concept that I hadn't even thought of before, like something I hadn't even realized about myself when it came to these failed premises that I was, operating in. And that's, I want control. And when the lack of control started showing up is when I started dragging my feet, because that's the only thing that I had control over. So, yikes. Now, we have all these different schools of thought kind of working simultaneously. And that's what ends up happening when you're really getting down to the nitty gritty. Because this is like the deep version of like how to be more productive. Not just some surface level, here's 3 things you could do, keep it pushing, whatever. But no, I really want to see you win, fam. And I want it to be sustainable for you and your life. And I'm just telling you my story so that, I can kind of spark some direction in what you need to do to get it together in your life. But after I realized all these things, my overall happiness became a priority, right? And in that moment, I realized like, okay, bet. Now we got to put something into application. All this studying and stuff, it's cute. It's really, really cute. It's really fun to do the research because I'm a research type gal. But I have to put some things into application. And that's when I went back to this guy's idea of like the 5 and scratch off 2. I did it for about 2 weeks. It didn't really translate for me because I was still trying to do all 5. Even though it was scratched off on a piece of paper, my brain was like, fam, if it exists, we have to do it, right? And that's when I realized like, bump it. We're going to stick to 3. 3 is the magic number for me, right? And the reason why 3 works for me is because it's not too much. You know what I mean? Like, I can really hyper focus on things. I can really prioritize things. I can really get shit done. So what I tend to do is I have multiple lists of 3, right? Because I have different things that I have to accomplish in my life. When I go to work, I have to do things there. When I come home, I have things to do here. I have to, maintain my household. I have a dog. I have all these different things that are calling me to do things. Like, the work don't stop. So, what I'll do is I'll make multiple lists of 3, right? I have this handy dandy performance planner that I picked up a year or so ago. And basically in it, I'll write down 3 different columns. One column is for work. Another column is just personal, regular human shit. And then the last column is my personal brand. Every night, in preparation of the next day, I write down what 3 things need to be accomplished in the next 24 hours in order for it to be a fully accomplished day. And sometimes my personal brand doesn't have 3 things to do, right? Sometimes it has more than 3, but I have to prioritize what's the top 3 things in the next 24 hours. And my personal life doesn't necessarily always have 3 things to do, but if it has 3 or more, I just prioritize 3, etc., etc. Now, I don't put things down that take me less than 5 minutes to do. Those things aren't necessarily list worthy. If it takes me less than 5 minutes to do, I'll just do it, right? And that's where there's kind of flexibility in this method. So, for example, with work, I tend to check my email 3 times a day. The number 3. And the reason why I choose 3 is because there are certain things on the list that are contingent upon response from somebody else, right? So I'll check the email when I first wake up. Well, not first wake up, but in the morning when I first get into work mode. I'll check it again after lunch, and then I'll check it again 2 hours before I leave the office. That way I can make sure that I've gotten everything that I need to collect either for that day or for the following day, right? So the things on the list are things that are top priority. an example I can give you from work as well, because I think that that's going to be one of the most structured settings that I could really, show this application. We have a newsletter that goes out every Friday. I don't put anything on my top 3 until Tuesday or Wednesday for that newsletter. And the reason why I do that is because I, want to give myself enough time to, get things, send it out, get it back, and then, distribute. And then 2, I don't want to be overwhelmed with the idea of something that's happening weekly, because it has to happen weekly anyway. So it doesn't matter if I put it on Monday or Wednesday, it's going to happen either way. So why clutter my brain with it on Monday, right? So the newsletter typically goes on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. To be realistic, Wednesday, because I can get it done on Wednesday. Get it reviewed probably Wednesday or Thursday and have it released on Friday. Boom, done and done. That's an editorial freaking timeline, whatever, right? So knowing that on Monday, I can use that day to really focus in on graphics or something that I can do by myself that doesn't necessarily require back and forth of email. So that's one of the things that'll go on the list. It's something that I can do by myself. I'm also building out a knowledge-based system. That's something I can do by myself. I mean, I've already sent out emails to, get information to add to this knowledge-based system. But the truth of the matter is, I can focus on it by myself. So my top 3 list is really just the things that can keep the week pushing. And doing things this way, it allows me to look at the week objectively as well. I'm able to look at it and say, what do I have coming up this week, and how can I make the things a priority, right? I work for 8 hours a day, so in 8 hours, 3 things can get done, right? And those 3 things, I've strategically picked 3 things for each day so that it can bleed into the next day. And so that if it's a big task, those things are being done a little bit over time every day so that we can get the final result, right? So that's kind of the application side of it. Now, the result side of it is, in doing this system, not only have I been able to lift my anxiety, I've also been able to better show up in other places in my life. I can focus on the most important things, get those things done, and then I can break free of it. I'm not married to these things for longer than what they exist, right? And to go without saying, there's a lot of delegation that happens when you have these systems in place. One major thing I should include in this video and on this podcast episode is that there has to be tasks that you handle and tasks that you can hand off. And it's a tricky mix at first because you're not too confident about what you can hand off and what you have to do yourself. But where I work, we have an entire tech support team, right? I don't necessarily have to do all the things that people in the office are asking me to do for tech support. I can delegate that to them, put a ticket in and have them do something, and then I can report back what the findings are, or go in and do the after work of what they've done in the preliminary stages of a task, So there's always different ways to delegate, and the real thrill of it, the real fun of it is getting creative and finding out how you can delegate different tasks, right? So that's one of the things, right? I've also been able to use another method called time blocking. And basically what time blocking does is you look at a task and you say, okay, it may take me an hour and a half, 2 hours to get this thing done. So then you just carve out 2 hours, whether you do it on your calendar through your email address, through Google, or you write it down on good old fashioned paper. I tend to do mine a little bit on paper in the planner that I have, and then I do it on my calendar for work so that people don't schedule meetings for me during the times that I'm doing my thing. And the time blocking really does go hand in hand with this because it holds you accountable. I even went as far as to buy a timer so that I can have a physical thing in front of me that can let me know how much time I have left in a thing. And I know what you're thinking. Why did you buy a timer when you have an iPhone and you can use that? It's because I don't trust myself to just go on the phone to look at the timer or the time. I know for a fact I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to start texting. I might even go on social media. Those things are time sucks. And I don't have the time for that, especially when we're only limiting ourselves to 3 things to get done in an 8-hour period. So that's dead, right? I've also been able to use a couple other methods that I'll talk about in other videos. But basically, the most important takeaway is that if you only have 3 things to do in your 8-hour period at work, or you only have 3 things to do for the 4 or 5 hours that you're active outside of work, it really does lighten the load on you because you're not really putting all of your ideas and the pressure of all those ideas on yourself all at once. You're really able to take bite-sized pieces. And I know a lot of times creators or coaches or mentors will say, take it, a day at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. But up until recently, I really didn't know how that looked for me. And I'm really excited to report on this because I think that it's one of those methods that really does help. This also has given me the opportunity to give my peers and colleagues the impression that I am fast at my job because I get things done in a timely fashion because I'm focused on one thing at a time. But it comes from this notion that multitasking is the devil, right? Like that's where all this started. Multitasking is the devil. I don't need to be multitasking, goddammit. Multitasking is something that I've never really been that great at as far as being efficient at it. I can do it, but will everything come out with great results? Probably not. Not in my case. I mean, there are some unicorns out there that can get things done and get a bunch of things done. Kudos to them. It's not me, and it may not be you either. So this is something that was birthed out of this idea that multitasking is trash, fam. So if you feel like I feel, try it out, and see what you can come up with in doing the power of 3. I also think that the power of 3 comes from the human desire to win, because in having 3 things to do and scratching them off your list and feeling like you did something, you won the day, fam. You won the day. And when you feel like a winner, you're going to keep going. And that's why I said at the very beginning of this episode that this is a method to help you not burn out, because doing the minimum amount with the maximum amount of results will always make you feel like you're on top of it. And you are. You really are. Because you are getting things done and you're being actually productive as opposed to fake productive where you may get a whole bunch of little stuff done, but it's nothing that matters, right? And last but not least, it is a way to take control back. And if you're anything like me and you have anxiety or you just feel like you need to have control over certain aspects of your life, this method is really good for that because you do have control over your day. You're able to really take the day by the horns and get shit done. And I'm here for it. So let me know in the comments if this is something that you would give a try. I'm really interested in if this is anything that sounds like it would work for you, because if you're anything like I was and you're suffering from like being overwhelmed, or you just have a lot of stuff on your plate and it's not gonna change because that's just part of who you are, I really do think that this will work for you, fam, because it has changed my life drastically and the proof is in the pudding. Like before, I couldn't even put out a YouTube video at all, let alone one every week for productivity purposes. The podcast was suffering because I just could not get myself to do the thing. Like I was setting myself up for failure in so many ways, and it was hurting me, and it was really hurting my ego, my self-esteem. It was hurting all these things that I want to do. Like, I really want to show up in these places. The talk show would not be here at all if I was still trying to do things the old way. It just does not work for me. So the Power of Three might be a really good way for you to get your act together. I'm telling you, it was a life-changing methodology for me. And if you're listening to this podcast, just know you're not alone, fam. Like, you're not alone. If you suffer from anxiety, if you have imposter syndrome, or if you self-sabotage a lot, I feel you. Like, I am in the same boat. I've done those things already, and I've taken myself out of a lot of opportunities just because I had this idea that I couldn't handle it. But here lately, with this Power of Three methodology that I've been putting into practice, I swear it has changed everything. Let me know in the comments if you are at all going to try this, if you've suffered from any of those things like anxiety or self-sabotage, or if you are consistently overwhelmed with your workload. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this methodology. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure you head on over to YouTube, where I have a ton of videos on productivity and getting your act together, because that's one of the things that I'm super passionate about. And as you heard, I'm such a work in progress, right? It's not over. It's not done. It's still going. This works now. It may not work later. You know, like, there's always room to improve, and always areas that we can continue to refine so that we can get the most out of our experiences here while we're here to experience them, right? So I'm just really excited about how much of my time I have back by using this method, and I'm just really stoked to be able to share it, because it's been such a game changer for me. And also, to go without saying, it has worked for me. And 6 months of practice to finally be able to come tell you all about what I've been doing to be on top of all these tasks, I'm just really excited, because literally it was not like this before, right? Even at my most productive, quote unquote, productive times in my life, there was still a lot of dragging of the feet, procrastination, and bullshit happening. That's why things didn't get done to completion. And that's why I had to change it up. I had to try to figure out ways for me to set myself up for success and stop allowing failure to be an option for me, right? So the other side of this that I want to get into, but I'll make another podcast episode to talk about it, is systems and processes, right? So earlier on in this episode, I talked about delegating some tasks off to other people, and then, leaning on your support, whether it's like, in my case, IT at work, or, somebody else that's in the same department or anything like that. Systems and processes have been my best friend in using the Power of Three methodology, but I'm going to go more into that on a different episode of Donuts, Coffee, and Tech. So make sure that you're subscribed here, however you're listening to this or watching me, because I want to share with you all these different systems that I've put in place that have really been game changing in the way that I've been able to get shit done. And not only that, but like some of the processes, I didn't even know that they were so effective, because I was doing bits of a process, but not the whole thing in its entirety. And once I started learning that, hey, listen, that's actually a small tidbit of something else that you can be implementing to get your shit together, fam, change the game. Listen, let me know in the comment section or in the show's review section, I guess that's what's that called. Let me know if you are interested at all in those systems and processes. I'll make sure I'll drop the link once those videos come about. And yeah, we'll keep the conversation going as much as we can so that we can help each other out. Let me know what you're doing. I'll let you know what I'm doing. I'll keep posting content of this nature if it helps you all in any capacity, because that's what I'm here to do. Listen, in closing, I want to say the Power of Three really does work for me. And as you heard from my story before, I tried a lot of shit. I've tried a lot of shit. That's just being 100. Like, I've done a lot of different things and it just was not working for your girl. So here we are with this methodology that has really changed everything up for me. Make sure that if you're not already following this podcast, Donuts, Coffee, and Tech, make sure that you are following the podcast. We are on every platform. When I say we, I'm talking about me, myself, and I, because I'm the only person that hosts this show. I always say we. It's the royal we. Damn it. That's just what it is. But go ahead and follow the podcast, Donuts, Coffee, and Tech, anywhere that you can listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel because I'll be dropping content there. I am dropping content there weekly to kind of help you get your shit together. And also, let's connect on social media, fam. Like, I really am excited to have so many new followers that I can talk my talk with and, help you all do great things in your life, because that's what I'm really here to do, is to help others reach their full potential. Specifically in this realm, it's been business owners and creators, but whoever's listening to this, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter the industry, it doesn't matter your focus. All these things can be used no matter where you're at in your life, and it can be used for business or personal. But my end goal is to help as many folks as possible get this under control. This idea of, like, you got to be super multifaceted and all, it's a whole bunch of toxic ass methodologies that are being used right now, but we'll talk about that later. Thank you to everybody who has listened to this episode and all the episodes of Donuts, Coffee, and Tech. I'm forever grateful. Y'all know how I feel about you. You are the real MVP, and there would be no content for real if it wasn't for people that were subscribing to it and listening to it and sharing it. So thank you so much for all that you've done to make Donuts, Coffee, and Tech continue on. But I just want to say, let me know what you want to hear, what you want to see, and I'll see you all next week. Peace.